The future has arrived. As the world and humanity itself moves faster and faster into unimaginable possibilities, old institutions that built connection and shaped our sense of meaning are falling by the wayside. In their wake, profound questions about ethics, our purpose, and spirituality demand new answers. Join your host, Scott Mason, in Season 2 of the Purpose Highway podcast. We will explore how these social changes will revolutionize our society. We will learn how they impact our own search for connection and meaning. And we will hear stories of influencers whose lives have had radical change from the inside and found profound connection to others and themselves through a new definition of meaning. The future has arrived. Are you ready?
When you're racing down the Purpose Highway, we want to make sure you're healthy and happy every step of the way. That's why we're proud to partner with It's NOLA, 21st century plant-based healthy granola snack bites made with real ingredients and audacious flavor. It's NOLA crafts small batch hand-rolled granola balls that are vegan, gluten-free, and naturally low in sugar. Locally made in Brooklyn, It's NOLA's delightful bites come in 3 flavors: luscious cranberry coconut, sassy mango masala, and dark, decadent, chewy chocolate. It's NOLA is available to both individual customers and for wholesale accounts at itsnola.com. That's itsnola.com. Guests on this show are already enjoying this delicious snack. Check out It's NOLA's website for yourself and find out how good it is. Hello, everybody. It's Scott Mason revving up for another race down the Purpose Highway. And sitting next to me in the front seat is Yonason Goldson. Yonason is the director of Ethical Imperatives, LLC. It works with leaders to create a culture of ethics that builds trust, sparks initiative, and drives productivity. He's a keynote and TEDx speaker, trainer, coach, and rabbi, as well as a podcast host, columnist, and author. Repentant hitchhiker, world traveler, and retired high school teacher in St. Louis. He's published hundreds of articles applying ancient rabbinic wisdom to the challenges of the modern secular world, and 6 books, most recently Grappling with the Gray, an ethical handbook for personal success and business prosperity. Yonason, welcome to the show. I am so happy to have you here today.
Thank you, Scott. I feel like I need to lie down after that introduction. That was. I'm also a little concerned that my neighbor just revved up his lawnmower, so I hope that doesn't come through on the recording.
You know what? We keep it real here on the Purpose Highway. We never know who's going to drive by. That's one of the beauties of that particular metaphor. So we will make it through somehow. The substance is what we care about on this road. And I'm going to start with some substance right away. According to data that you discuss in your own fact sheets and at length, trust in the ethics of the business community is at an all-time low. According to data available anywhere, trust in major ethical institutions such as organized religion is low. Trust in the ethical decisions of politicians is low. From where we're at right now in our culture, why should anyone care about ethics?
I think the question contains the answer. Why are we having a crisis in trust? In 2018, an organization called the Trust Edge Leadership Institute asked employees what they want most from a job. And the number one answer they gave is a boss we can trust. And I just heard recently that a large majority of employees say that they would trust a total stranger more than they trust their boss.
Wow.
Which is astonishing and terrifying. How can you have a community without trust? We talk, the late Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, former chief rabbi of England, he was an extraordinary person, but he made this distinction. We talk about a social contract. The problem with the language of a contract is it's strictly, business, really. So what we should talk about is a social covenant, which means that we are committed to each other. How can we be committed to each other if we don't trust each other? How can we be committed to each other if we don't have a common core of values in which we are all to which we're all committed collectively? I mean, this is what the framers tried to create in the United States with the Constitution. It wasn't a document of laws. It was a document of principles on which to build a sound and flourishing society. When we take responsibility for our personal ethics, what we do is we make it easier for other people to trust us. And that creates a healthy society, healthy community, healthy business, healthy neighborhoods, healthy families.
I have to ask this, though. The people that no one trusts are the people that we've given the keys to power and financial success to. So I kind of have to come back to that and say, well, who cares if you trust me? I'm your boss. It's not like anyone is saying, you're untrustworthy, so I won't promote you. It's not like anyone is saying, I don't trust you, so I won't elect you to office. Why should I care? If anything, the cultural message seems to be, hey, be untrustworthy. That'll get you ahead fast. People say they care about trust, but do they really?
Well, the truth is, we care about trust. You're not going to put yourself in a situation where you are vulnerable to somebody you don't trust, or at least to somebody whom you know is untrustworthy. We have met the enemy and it is us. It's easy to say, let's blame the politicians. It's easy to say, let's blame the system. But we are the system. We do vote for the politicians. I mean, I will tell you that since I voted the first time first presidential election I voted in was 1980, I have voted for main party candidates less than a handful of times. Because I will not be forced into a situation where I have to choose between two people I believe are unfit to serve. Now, that's just me. I'm one person. But if we would all take responsibility for our votes, if we would take responsibility for our own personal behavior. They used to say that all politics is local. And the problem today with mass media, all politics is global. And the problem with that is that we feel helpless. It's what exactly you just said. What can I do? How can I make a difference? Why should I bother? But let's get back to that idea. If I start in my own neighborhood, I start in my own community, I start in my own family. Really, I start inside myself. Because ultimately, I have to be responsible to me before I can be responsible to anybody else. And if each of us would take that, then someone else sees it in us. We inspire one other person. That's one more person who can inspire more people. And there is no telling how far those ripples can go.
Yonason, did you always believe that?
I think I did. There's a word, meliorism, which is the belief that it's possible to make the world better.
Meliorism.
And it's not just by save the whales and save the snails and save the rainforest. It's by me making myself the best I can be. What's the definition of a good person? Someone who's trying to be a better person. And if we would take that to heart, Okay, I can't change the world right now, but I can change me. And by changing myself, I'm contributing to making the world a better place.
Do you think that making that internal change, that making those ethical decisions is itself an ethical imperative?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You said that beautifully. Because, we can't control outcomes. In my theological philosophy, the whole world is created for the purpose of free will. To make choices, free choices between good and evil, between right and wrong, or between levels, between right and right, or wrong and wrong, which is those gray areas, which is why I titled my book, Grappling with the Gray. Because when it's black and white, okay, that's not so challenging for most of us. But all those shades of gray, that's where it's really tough. And it's the sincere effort to find the best possible choice that makes all the difference. We're not going to get it right all the time. Sometimes we'll blow it. Sometimes we'll mess up. Sometimes we'll misinterpret. We're human beings. We make mistakes.
Yes, we do, and I'm the king.
But it's okay.
I am.
It's okay, because what's a mistake? A mistake is an opportunity to learn. A mistake is an opportunity to recognize how to do better next time. And that's the key to a successful life and a happy life.
Yonason, tell us your story in the context of how you came to care so much that you devoted your life to this.
Well, there are a lot of places I could start, but to give you the basic thumbnail, I studied English in college at the University of California, and I chose...
Great set of schools.
What's that?
By the way, I said I got to give them a shout out. They're a great set of schools.
Yeah. And I really thrived in my college career, and I chose English because I love stories, because I love words, and because I love the idea of communicating messages through stories. Just as an aside, a study came out a while back that said that people who read literary fiction show more moral sensitivity than people who read nonfiction.
Why is that, do you think, by the way?
It's really quite simple. Our brains are wired for stories. And I can give you all the facts and all the data and all the information, but the story is what creates the context. It's what implants. You remember the story. So if you remember the story, you're more likely to remember the message that is taught through the story.
Yes.
So my story, I graduated with my degree in English. Well, what do you do with a degree in English? I don't know if I necessarily recommend doing what I did, but I took my degree in English and I went hitchhiking across the United States.
Well, look, I went to law school. I think your choice was a lot better.
Well, they're both dangerous.
Yes.
Did that for about half a year, across the Atlantic, went backpacking through Europe, until 1 year later I ended up in Israel. And that's where I connected with my Jewish roots. I'd been raised with no knowledge at all of what it meant to be Jewish. I knew I was Jewish. I knew it meant something. I just didn't know what. And I was astonished to discover this vibrant culture of deep thought, profound wisdom, high moral standards, and a committed, close-knit community. And it changed the whole trajectory of my life. I lived in Israel for 9 years, met my wife there, had our first 2 children, became an Orthodox rabbi, and then I embarked on my 23-year career teaching high school. 1 year in
Israel.
1 year in Budapest, Hungary, 2 years in Atlanta, Georgia, and 20 years in St. Louis, where I live now.
Well, let's go back to Israel a little bit. Paint a picture for us. Where were you living there? What was it like?
So I got to Israel planning to have a classic Jewish experience of volunteering on a kibbutz, a collective farm, picking oranges or grapefruits. Through an unlikely series of events, I ended up instead in a rabbinic college. And if you don't know what that is, well, neither did I.
Okay. Well, I guess you found out.
Yeah, it's a seminary. It's an institution of higher learning where we study the ancient texts and their commentaries. And, if you would have asked me walking in there, I would have said, what possible relevance could a 3,300-year-old document have to me and my life? And fortunately, however it happened, and I'm not entirely sure how, but however it happened, I had an open mind. Because my first day, and I tell this story in my TED Talk, my first day, I was brought into a room for a class on Jewish philosophy. And fortunately, I took a seat in the far back corner of the room. And why was that fortunate? Because the entire room filled up around me. The instructor walked in, everybody stood up, and I tried to get out. Because he wasn't just a rabbi, he was Hasidic with the big black hat and the long black coat and the scraggly beard and the side locks and the thick glasses, and I just knew what was coming. And, you better listen to me or you're going to burn in hell for all eternity. But I was trapped in this room. I couldn't climb over all the people to get out. So I thought, okay, I could survive anything for an hour.
Right.
And then he starts to talk. And he sounds like a professor from Johns Hopkins University, which it turns out he was. And that taught me so much right there about challenging stereotypes, about the danger of putting labels on people and preconceived notions. By the time that lecture was over, I just could not believe that someone who looked like an anachronism from 18th century Europe could sound like a professor of philosophy. And that got me to stay. I said, there's something here I've got to figure out. And I didn't buy in right away. Really, I went kicking and screaming, but it was that willingness to hear something that challenged my preconceptions, that challenged my worldview. Even though that was painful. I mean, here I was. I'd been around the world. I'd traveled. I'd gone to college. I was 24 years old, and I had life all figured out.
Exactly.
And now, all of a sudden, wait a second. Maybe you don't know everything. Maybe you don't know anything.
Do you think that openness to hearing other perspectives has a relationship to ethical development generally, or to the field of ethics across the board?
No doubt about it. I mean, think about what passes for political debate in our society today. I yell at you, you yell at me, I call you names, you call me names. I say you're evil, you say I'm evil. Oh, what have we just accomplished? Now we're even more polarized and more entrenched in our ideologies. This groupthink, I'm just going to retreat into these little enclaves of people who think just like me, and we're all going to nod and say the same aphorisms and the same slogans again and again, and don't you dare question the party line, because if you do, you'll be excommunicated.
Yeah, I've got to ask, though, sometimes I wonder if, and please dispute me if you completely disagree, that it's easier to do that, and we go into our bubbles of like-thinking people because that easiness is comforting. Whereas facing our own limitations, hearing other points of view that are completely alien, perhaps even initially repulsive to ours, is hard. It can be just as hard, if not harder, than climbing over all those people to escape that rabbi / professor. Do you think, am I hearing you correctly, that perhaps embedded in an ethical life is a willingness to do what's hard? Because I just want to live a life that's easy, Jonas. I just want to chill back and have my beer and sit in a lazy boy.
It's actually even worse than what you're describing. Because it's self-perpetuating.
What do you
mean? I mean that how many of us, Carl Jung said, people don't have ideas, ideas have people. And in my TED Talk, I ask the audience, I say, where do your values come from? Where do you get your beliefs? Did you choose them or did they choose you? Because we are all products of our own environment. And we absorb our ideas first from our parents and our teachers and our peers, and then the entertainment industry and the news media. There's no guarantee that we're going to be getting a clear and a well-reasoned body of ideology or ideas or philosophies.
Well, wait a minute. What do you say to those who, and I'm sure you encounter this all the time, I know I do, could just be me, but I bet it's not just me. Folks who say, well, I believe something because I was raised that way.
That's a good start. But then question it. Then explore it. Understand it. You know, Judaism has no such concept as a leap of faith. We believe that God revealed himself through nature, through science, through his revealed word, and that the answers are all there. I shouldn't say all. There's always has to be an element of uncertainty, because that's what preserves free will. But the truth is, are we really certain of anything? You read classical philosophy, the great philosophers, they weren't even sure that they existed.
And sometimes
well, yeah, I mean, you know, you've got science fiction stories where we're all hooked up. You know, we're living in the Matrix.
Oh, yes.
And to some degree, I think we are. But, but, you know, think about that. You can't really know anything for sure. I mean, we're sitting here, I'm sitting here at a table. Feels solid. What does science tell me? It's made up of tiny particles that are spinning around at the speed of light. Absolutely. You really believe that? Sure, why not? Doesn't take any emotional investment. But nobody's ever actually seen an electron. There just seems to be evidence that that's the way the universe must work. But the moment that demands something from me, now all of a sudden my emotions are in play, my ego's in play. And what I was starting to say earlier about why it's worse is because if we don't reason our way to our beliefs, then we are naturally going to be insecure in them. And insecurity leads to extremism. It leads to fanaticism. It leads to stubbornness. I would rather associate myself with people who think like me because that is reassuring. And I don't have to feel that discomfort or that fear. Maybe somebody's going to call me out and ask me to explain what I really believe, and I'm not going to be able to do it because I haven't reasoned my way there. So better to never put myself in that situation. My college professor, Max Bird, said, I don't understand why people complain about being disillusioned. I would like to be relieved of my illusions. And I remember arguing with him. I said, yeah, but that's scary. That's uncomfortable. You said, right? All the gurus tell us we have to get out of our comfort zones. So why don't we do it? Because it's uncomfortable.
So, Yonason, you were teaching high school, and we got off track from your personal story a little bit. What happened next?
Well, yeah, I loved it. I loved challenging students. You know, I'm not a big fan of the Greeks and the Greek culture, but there's one Greek that I really admire, and that's Socrates.
Again, you're telling that to a lawyer? That name is a curse word to me. But that's because I had to endure his method.
Well, exactly.
And I was bad at it.
And think about that. You know, what was his method? I remember teaching in Atlanta, and this very bright girl, she suddenly, in exasperation, says, why can't you just tell us the answer?
Seriously.
Why not?
Why
not? Yeah. Because I want to show you that you can work your way to the answer yourself. And Socrates did this, and he forced people to re-examine their core principles. And what did he get for it? Condemned to death. Because that's what they did to annoying people back then. That was their cancel culture.
But yes, yeah, right. A real cancellation. But, Yonason, one thing that goes as to the virtues of the Socratic method is that occasionally, too, by virtue of the Socratic process of asking those questions, the person asking the questions also sometimes gets answers that forces them to reconsider. So it shifts the relationships between people, if they do it in good faith, in a way that they can end up coming to greater knowledge and understanding of a principle together. There's a shared growth experience, which in my opinion is powerful.
Oh yeah, there's nothing more exciting for me as a teacher than when a student would ask a question that I'd never thought of before. Because, here I am. I'm the adult. I'm the one with all the experience and the acquired wisdom. And I've got some 15-year-old kid. He says, well, what about this? And, you know what? I never thought of that. I mean, teachers can be intimidated by that. I found it invigorating, energizing. I'm learning with you. And in fact, the sages have a teaching that I learned a lot from my teachers, more from my colleagues, and most from my students.
That's incredible. So, how did you end up starting your current life trajectory?
Well, after 23 years teaching, I felt like I was getting to the end of the line. One of the real challenges we have, one of the many challenges we have in our society, is our educational system. And if you ask anybody who's been in teaching for a while, they will tell you that the level of the students continues to decline. And it's accelerated with all of these electronic gadgets. The intellectual discipline isn't there. The intellectual curiosity isn't there. The skills aren't there. The critical thinking skills, the mechanical skills. And I found by the last few years I was teaching that even nice, good kids, I was doing more remediation than I was actually, helping, get them to the point where I had gotten them in previous years as a teacher. And so I felt that it was time to find my next act. And the story about Cortez landing in the New World, and his men are making camp, and suddenly they're confronted by this band of natives, and they're outnumbered 100 to 1. And what's his first command? Burn the ships. Because if you know that you don't have a choice, you're going to find a way to make it work. Well, burn the ships for me was when my school shut down. Because we were too far to the middle. We weren't far enough to the right for the right. We weren't far enough to the left for the left, and consequently we got squeezed out. So that was for me, that was a point where I was pushed into making a choice what to do next. And I wanted to take the accumulated wisdom that I had learned and studied and taught and put it in a new presentation for professionals. Because the universal principles of Judaism are not just for Jews. They're for the world. The Ten Commandments are not just for Jews. They're for human beings. And the fundamental ideas of character, of ethical behavior, those are the keys to the kingdom. Those are the foundation stones of relationships, and relationships are the basis of success in business, in community, in family. And so my mission has become to teach professionals that you don't have to choose between being good and being successful. Just the opposite. Good ethics is good business. And it makes for a better society.
We're going to talk about that more in a little while. I want to go back to something that you shared with me during the pre-interview preparatory work that you did. And thank you for taking the time and effort to give me some thinking in advance. You indicated in that material an interest in discussing embracing the power of the future and the wisdom of the past. But Yonason, let's keep it real. Do you feel, from an ethical perspective, we even have a future?
I think it's an ethical imperative to do just that. Because without hope, there's no hope. I mean, if we don't believe we can make things better, then we won't try. And if we don't try, then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know these science fiction movies where they find a way of seeing the future, and then the future they see causes the future that they see.
Yes. 12 Monkey Syndrome.
What was the other one? There are a bunch of them. But in any case, yeah. And so we really, every human being has a moral obligation to take responsibility for building a better future. You know, there's a story, Jewish folk story, about a fellow who's traveling from Jerusalem to Tiberias in the north. And he comes to a crossroads. He doesn't know which way to go. And there's a directional sign, the kind with the different arrows. Problem is, it's broken. It's lying on the ground. All right? So Tiberias is straight up in the air, and that doesn't help too much. So what's he going to do? Well, he doesn't know which road is going to take him forward, but he knows which road he's come on. And so he takes the sign, he lifts it up, and he positions it so that the arrow is pointing to Jerusalem, where he came from, is pointing back the way he came. And now he can see which road is going to lead him to Tiberias. If we understand our past, we have a sense of direction into the future. And George Orwell says in 1984, right, that those who can control the present control the past, and those who control the past control the future. And this is something to really be concerned of with all of the different ways we're trying to rewrite history. History has so many priceless lessons. We don't have to reinvent the world. And of course, everybody knows that Santayana said, those who don't learn from the past are condemned to repeat it. But not as many people know Friedrich Hegel, who said the great lesson of history is that nobody learns from it. And that's got to change.
Yeah.
It's got to change. We have to take those lessons to heart, because then we have the tools, we have the arsenal to make our way into a successful future.
I hear what you have to say about the lessons from the ancient Jewish documents having applicability in the world today. This I that I'm talking about is not just me, Scott Mason, but it's a hypothetical I out there in the world, a listener or someone watching this on YouTube. I may not be religious myself. I may be spiritual, or I may be religious, but of a completely different religion. I may be a lapsed churchgoer, or maybe an agnostic. I might even be an atheist. If I am seeking to live an ethical life, is there any common space that I might have with anyone who's in any of these other groups in terms of what I'm looking for? What's your message to me?
Wisdom is wisdom. You don't have to buy into the whole package, but to recognize that we have, as a society, generations upon generations upon generations of brilliant people who thought deeply about human nature, about human purpose. Sir Isaac Newton famously said, if I've seen farther than others, it's because I stood on the shoulders of giants. When we discard the past, we are profoundly compromising our future. Because the lessons, the wisdom, the insights that are available to us about ourselves and about how to create a better world. They're all there. I mean, I wrote a book on the book of Proverbs, a commentary on the book of Proverbs. And the challenge with the book of Proverbs is, how do you take ancient teachings, 3,000-year-old teachings, and reformulate them in a language for the modern world? It's very hard to sit down and read ancient texts, but that's the job of modern interpreters, to find the core of those lessons and demonstrate the relevance in this world so that we can be better friends, better neighbors, better husbands and wives, better parents and children, better business people, better leaders, better followers. It's there for us. And if I don't necessarily, the sages say that there is wisdom among the nations of the earth. They may not have our theological tradition, but they have their thinkers, they have their wise men. And wisdom is to be valued and appreciated and learned from, even if it's not coming from my personal source.
Yonason, we've talked about business tangentially a couple times in the show already, and we're going to dive into it more deeply in a moment. But before we move into that, there's a commonly used word that lies behind the concept of ethics and goes as to some of the, in my opinion, some of the challenges that ethics in business or trust in business has faced. And it's a word that's thrown out there a lot, but I don't know if I truly understand when I think about it what it means. And that word is integrity. To you, what does integrity mean?
Well, I would refer you to Professor Stephen L. Carter, who wrote a book titled Integrity. He also wrote a book titled Civility, which I also recommend. But he makes an observation in there that makes the whole book worthwhile. And he says very simply, integrity comes from the word integer. What is an integer? Remember 8th grade math. I think it was 8th grade. An integer is a whole number. And integrity means being a whole person. We have the cliche, you don't just just talk the talk, you walk the walk, right? Cliches are usually true. That's how they get to be cliches. Right? Mixed messages, double standards, hypocrisy, moral, intellectual inconsistency. I mean, these are all the enemies of ethical behavior, of character. A person of character makes the same choice if there's $100 million on the table or 25 cents. The same principles apply large and small. Being honest means I tell the truth. Having integrity means I follow the truth. I act truthfully. It's a really frightening thing that they've shown that ethicists are likely to be less ethical than average people.
Why?
That's a good question. One theory is that you can study something, you can know it. In Judaism, we say the longest distance in the universe is from the head to the heart. I can know something intellectually, but it's a whole different process to integrate it into my being. And people who study ethics without a pure and devout commitment to absorb and internalize those values, what they're actually doing is they're teaching themselves mental gymnastics so that they can rationalize the decisions and outcomes that are attractive to them and become actually more unethical.
Right. You touched on this briefly a minute ago. Let's go into it a little bit more deeply. Why should businesses be more ethical? Because it's good for business, you said. Well, what kind of currency does that carry?
The kind we all care about.
So businesses should care nothing about themselves. That's living an ethical life.
Businesses, I mean, and this is a growing trend, really. The idea that businesses should have some sort of mission that goes beyond money. Well, I mean, on my website, I have a whole long page with all kinds of data and statistics. But when you compare employees who work for the most ethical companies versus the least ethical companies, those employees, they report that they're more engaged in work, they're more productive, they're happier on the job, they're less likely to depersonalize coworkers, they're less likely to leave. I mean, how expensive is it to replace an employee? I think it's more than double the annual salary.
Yeah.
And that's not even talking about the lack of productivity before they leave and the corrosive effect.
Or just the pain in the rear end.
Yeah, the corrosive effect on the work culture. I mean, according to statistics, to surveys, and this is already about 10 years old, I think it's $359 billion are lost to business and productivity every year in the U.S. due to workplace conflict. And as much as $550 billion to lack of employee engagement. And companies that are rated highest for ethics, they grow faster, they're more productive, they have better brand image, they have greater customer loyalty. I mean, it should be a no-brainer. And in fact, this is a question I get asked all the time. It's so obvious. Why don't people get it? And it's because we have this, our brains are at war with themselves. We have the frontal lobe, the prefrontal cortex, which is forward-looking, and we have the amygdala, which is, I want it now.
Yeah.
And the amygdala's got the upper hand. It's got the home court advantage.
Yonason, tell us about the most difficult ethical decision you've ever had to make.
Ooh, that's interesting. It's interesting that my father was a person of tremendous integrity.
Mm-hmm.
His father kept a business going through the Depression. And he did it he was out of the house when my father was 7 years old at the time of the Great Depression. He said for years he saw his father at dinner 7 days a week because his father was out of the house before my father woke up as a boy. He came home, they sat down for dinner, they ate dinner, my father went to bed. 7 days a week. That's how he kept his business going to provide for his family.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
He had a tremendous work ethic. Mm-hmm. And my father absorbed that from him. And, this is why culture is so important. And I'm responding to your question that, we may all have defining moments in our lives. My ethical decision was quite personal, and I'd rather not share it. But what I would say is this, is that more important to focus on are those little decisions. Because when we focus on the little decisions, then when we get to the big decision, we're going to be ready to handle it.
But I'm not going to let you totally off the hook. Tell us about a recent ethical decision you've had to make.
I would say that I was associated with a group. I'm going to leave this intentionally vague. I was associated with a group, and the leader, the head of the group, for reasons that he refused to explain to me and continues to refuse to explain to me, apparently decided that he just didn't value my participation in the group anymore. And this was after investing years and years and years in this group, in this organization.
I'm sorry.
And yeah, me too. And I had to make a decision. Do I stay for the benefit of the other members of the group who appreciated my being there? Or did I walk away because I couldn't trust the leadership?
Yeah.
And I didn't make that decision all at once. I made that decision really over the course of an extended period of time, when I gradually withdrew and participated less and less and less. Mm-hmm. And then eventually just had to completely disassociate myself because it was too internally distressing to me to associate with a leader in whom I had completely lost trust and for whom I had completely lost respect. And I still grapple with it. I still grapple with it because there are still people in that organization that would like me to come back.
But it does go back to what we were talking about earlier, for instance, about your voting patterns. Making a decision about how to behave when in the face of leadership that you're uncomfortable with, and what that means in terms of decisions that you may be making on a recurring basis. In that case, voting around whether you want to associate yourself with a party or a leader, which the leaders themselves are usually the embodiments of the parties that you're associating or disassociating with. And so I'm hearing a consistency in practice here, which to me, just as a listener, also goes as to one of the things that you talk about in a lot of your written and verbal material, which is around the importance of consistency in decision making. Am I correct?
Yeah. But I would say that, the phrase I like to use is there's no app for being ethical. We're dealing with competing levels of values, competing principles, and sometimes it gets really messy and really uncomfortable. It's hard to do the right thing. If it were easy, we would all do it. And part of the reason it's hard is because it's not always easy to know what the right thing to do is. Yeah. But that's why I say it's that commitment to grapple, to struggle, to get as close as I can, to get as great a level of clarity as I can, and to summon up the courage to put it into practice even when it's really hard, even when it's painful. That's what makes the biggest difference. It's that commitment.
Earlier, we talked about the need for us to believe that ethics in our culture can be saved. Do you think that our culture, from an ethical perspective, deserves to be saved?
Oh, yeah. And I would even say this. I would say that I don't believe things are nearly as bad as they appear. I think that a large part of the problem is our media, which I think has lost all moral direction. It's all about advertising revenue. Mm-hmm. And to get advertisers, you need viewers. And to get viewers, you need to be salacious. You need to be confrontational. You need to be extremist. And that, the algorithms, they're set up this way to point us towards more and more extreme content. Well, the system is being rigged against us more and more and more. It creates a perception of polarization, a perception of acrimony that I think is largely exaggerated. I think most of us want to be somewhat moderate in our approach. We want to get along with people. That means that we have to take responsibility for ourselves. We can't blame the system. And discipline, being disciplined. Just because something is entertaining doesn't mean it's psychologically healthy. Just because food tastes good doesn't mean it's healthy for me. We all understand diet. Of course, that doesn't affect everybody's behavior. We all understand exercise. Doesn't affect everybody's behavior. Why is it that cookbooks and diet books are the two most popular kinds of books, right? Because we're at war with ourselves.
So, before we wrap up, I've got one lightning question for you.
Okay.
If you could be any legendary hero, who would you be and why?
Any legendary hero, my goodness. I suppose, now that you're asking the question, I suppose I would be Abraham. Because Abraham was called the Hebrew. And the word Hebrew in Hebrew means the one on the other side. Now, they called him that because he came from the other side of the Jordan River. But we call him that because the whole world was on one side and he was on the other. He came to a vision of reality that the entire world had rejected. And he held fast. People wanted to kill him. People tried to kill him. People tried every kind of device and tactic to discredit him, to undermine him, to destroy him. And he held firm in his beliefs, and he changed the world. Half the population of this planet follows the monotheistic philosophy that Abraham brought into existence. And I would say that every one of us should aspire to be an Abraham, to find the truth, seek the truth, grab hold of the truth, and commit ourselves to it.
That was an answer that absolutely did not lack in ambition. Yonason, how can people find out more about you? Where can they connect with you?
Please look me up on my website, which is my name, Yonason Goldson, Yonason, Golson.com. Very active on LinkedIn. So please connect with me there and invite people to check out my podcast, which is called The Rabbi and the Shrink.
And it's a great one. And your content on LinkedIn is excellent. Yonason, it's been great taking a ride with you today. Thank you so much for joining us. If you liked this episode, please be sure to subscribe and leave a review on Apple or a comment on YouTube. And see you next time for another trip down the Purpose Highway. When you're racing down the Purpose Highway, we want to make sure you're healthy and happy every step of the way. That's why we're proud to partner with It's NOLA, 21st century plant-based healthy granola snack bites made with real ingredients and audacious flavor. It's NOLA crafts small batch hand-rolled granola balls that are vegan, gluten-free, and naturally low in sugar. Locally made in Brooklyn, It's NOLA's delightful bites come in 3 flavors: luscious cranberry coconut, sassy mango masala, and dark, decadent, chewy chocolate. It's NOLA is available to both individual customers and for wholesale accounts at itsnola.com. That's itsnola.com. Guests on this show are already enjoying this delicious snack. Check out It's NOLA's website for yourself and find out how good it is.